What's up, fight fans? Welcome to the fourth edition of the ContenderCast podcast. I'm your host. This is my first time ever actually hosting a podcast, so we're getting all types of fancy up in here. You guys can comment and tell me how awful I am, but we are here. Week 4 is in the books. I'm joined by Big Tone, Tony Fagnanos with an S. Tone, how we doing, man?
I applaud you for actually coming through and pluralizing my name after I have been pluralizing it for the last pretty much this whole show, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, even on Legends show, you said my name was Kings. You said it everywhere. You know, I guess the handle, my Twitter handle is a little confusing, so that's completely understandable. But yeah, man, I'm super excited to be talking with you again about Contender Series. We had another exciting week in the books. Before we get into any specifics, what was your overall thoughts on this week? Because for me, I keep waiting for there to be a boring week. You know, it has to happen. We can't keep having these exciting fights over and over again. But it happens, man. What did you think? Did you enjoy it?
Okay, so it was definitely a really exciting card. But if we're going to rank the 4 so far, I think this might be number 4.
I completely agree, 100%. Which is saying something, because I think that this episode is still good.
It really is.
Yeah. You know, we saw Marcel Dorf, our friend on Twitter, over at MMA DNA in the Netherlands. He tweeted out a stat that I wasn't aware of at the time, which was that between the time that – I forget who was the first decision on this card. It was Palacios and Misic, or was it – whatever. The first decision on the card, from that point backwards, there were 16 fights in between the two decisions, the first decision of the season and the second decision of the season. So there's something to be said there. I mean, we don't imagine if I can't remember the last time that an entire UFC card worth of entertainment ended in finishes. So this, whatever they're doing, the motive, the contract being held over the heads of these guys, it's putting on some great entertainment for us fans.
For sure, yeah. We even saw, we'll get to that later, but a flyweight finish. Those are rare. So, yeah, definitely it's been action-packed.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the most action-packed sequences that we had on this episode of the Contender Series was the first fight between Jalen Turner and Max Mustaki. I think that, on paper, neither one of these guys, in my opinion, when I was doing research for this, neither one of them jumped out at me as being – this guy's a surefire UFC, Kevin Aguilar, Anthony Hernandez, a prospect. But at the same time, we had two guys that, in this fight, they showed why they were there. They had some intangibles. We had one guy that had all the promise in the world. He's still very green in Jalen Turner. We had a very tough opponent, Max Mustaki, who kind of had that, that Jason Knight, Brandon Davis type mentality of just, I'm going to keep coming at you, even though if you hit me with the kitchen sink. So, were you impressed with Jalen Turner, and were you also impressed with the chin that Max Mustaki showed? Because I sure was.
Yeah, I thought I was like, so the way this fight kicked off, and Mustaki's getting dropped, and I'm like, he's done, and then he gets back up and going full zombie mode. I was like, this is the shit. Mustaki comes back. He's still throwing. Like, the announcers, they're acting like, he's completely done. But yet Mustaki's still, like, throwing bombs back. I think at one point he even made Turner shoot for a takedown.
Yeah, he was actually at one point waving. Herb Dean was, saying, fight back. And every time he'd do it, Mustaki would throw his arms like, get out of here.
He never quit. He never quit. Then again, Jalen Turner is the one who pieced him the fuck up and bloodied him up, hit him. It wasn't even Mustaki's chin that gave out that led to that knockdown either. It was a body shot. So that just lets you know, after eating all those punches on the chin, that never dropped him. It was the shot to the body that dropped him. And then it was very unfortunate that we didn't get to see more of this fight because of the broken foot. I'm sure Mustaki would have continued on, but that's what the doctor's there for. That's what the ref is there for, to make decisions for the fighters who, sometimes are not going to make the right choice.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You took usually with we see a fight like the Paul Felder Mike Perry fight from last weekend, and on one hand, a fighter fought for 3 rounds with a broken arm. Then he looked at Max Mustaki's foot, and it was just so visibly obvious. You know, there was no hiding that. It just looked like somebody had stuck a pump in his foot and just pumped it up. You know, it was nastiness. So both guys, I know that kind of sucked for, you know, they both ended up, I feel like on, you know, if Turner had gone out there and head kicked him in the second round, there was a chance that he could have got that contract. So it kind of sucked on both guys' ends. But at the same time, I think that, you know, Turner's a guy that's clearly on the UFC radar. That's what Dana White said after the show. And then also, you know, Max Mustaki is a guy that, you know, maybe he can pile up a couple more wins. And, you know, the UFC will always have in the back of their mind that he's a tough, you know what, and that he puts on the type of fights that I'm sure, you know, Dana White, I think they showed him in between rounds, between the first and before the fight was called off. He was, you know, clapping and looked very pleased with the performance. And I'm sure that was partly due to the toughness Mustaki showed. But that was, you know, great fight there. I think that was the best, like I said, the best action we saw all night. Moving to the second fight, which you referenced.
Wait. No, so I can drop F-bombs, but then you can't say son of a bitch?
Hey, there might be kids watching this. You know that?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. The last thing I would say about that.
ContenderCast kids that are still, you know, watching PG-13, they can only hear one F-bomb per episode.
All right. I feel you. The last thing I would say about this fight, though, is, like, guys like Mustaki, like, I feel like they're always good to throw on an undercard of some random UFC event, you know, some random fight night. And it's probably definitely on Dana's radar for, you know, something like that. Just the sheer toughness he showed. You know, I think that I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if they throw him on some undercard next year, or 2 years from now or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and an interesting tidbit that I had tweeted out when I was talking to Max Mustaki before this fight, he actually told me that this was the first camp that he's ever trained in a cage for. He's saying, you know, usually he said he's never trained inside a ring or a cage or anything. He said his Island Fights, the guy that runs Island Fights, the promoter, Dean Toole, actually he had just built a gym in the back of his I think he said like behind his office or something in some type of warehouse. I don't necessarily understand, but he was saying it was the first time that he's trained in a cage for a camp leading up to it. He had spent a couple weeks at Jackson's MMA a few years ago where he got some work in there, but never an actual camp with a cage, which to me, man, if he's come that far with, you know, some garages and stuff, like for a guy like him, he's had some quite success from, you know, he's been quite successful with the little tools that he's been able to use. So, you know, there's a good chance we'll see him back. And so do you have any more comment, or is that pretty much on, you know?
That's just odd though that he has never trained in a cage before.
Yeah. Wild. And if for anybody else that is interested in looking up other fights of his that are really good, check out his fight against, I just compared him to him, but check out his fight against Brandon Davis, because we know what Brandon Davis brings, his type of fight, and him versus Mustaki was, you know, pretty much what we saw in this fight, only it was 3 rounds and a lot of back and forth action. So check that one out. But going to move on to the second fight of the night, the flyweights. We had Jordan Espinoza with his second shot on the Contender Series. He won last year against Nick Urso in a rematch of a fight they had a few years prior. Won that fight by submission, didn't get the contract, but did get the invite back to Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. He had one fight in between that time, and it was against C.J. Hamilton, who also competed on the first season. He knocked him out, I believe, or I think he finished him at the Arnold Classic, actually. They had a couple MMA fights that were there, so that was going on. So 2 Contender Series vets he had beaten entering this fight against Riley Dutrell, a fighter out of, I believe, Asia somewhere, Philippines, something like that, but he was Hawaiian. I think he fought for PXC, which is not a promotion anymore. It was notable at one time. More of a finisher. This was a good fight, man. It almost went the full 3 rounds. Espinoza ended up securing a late KO after a pretty solid, showcase of his skills. What were your overall thoughts on the fight? Were you impressed with Espinoza? And what did you think of the stoppage at the end? I know some people had a little bit of an issue with the stoppage with just 2 seconds left in the fight.
I thought they should have signed him the first time. The second time, I was like, they better give this guy the fucking contract. Like, he is a flyweight out here finishing people. That's the second finish on the Contender Series. And he's a flyweight. There's just not a lot of guys who are able to get finishes at that weight division. And I was extremely impressed. I mean, from the early what was it, a left check hook that dropped Dutro in the first round. Um, that was very impressive. And then probably the most impressive was that combo, man. He lands the 1-2 perfectly timed. I mean, it briefly staggers. Oh! That's the audio for it right there, a sneak peek. He lands the 1-2 combo and then waits for Dutro to get back up because he kind of wobbles, and then lands the head kick perfectly. I was like, this guy's timing, speed, like his striking is just otherworldly, basically.
It's like a video game.
Yeah, and like I know the Mighty Mouse comparisons are ridiculous and everything, but the speed, okay, he might be as fast as Mighty Mouse is the point, and that might be true. You could take all the other stuff out of there, but the speed is legit. And as far as the stoppage goes, you can't. It's all it. Unfortunately, it kind of is about appearances. If you're up against the cage, curled up, like you can't expect the ref not to step in. And on the Contender Series, they are going to be a lot more careful. You're not fighting for, these aren't like pivotal UFC matchups, title contenders, title fights, stuff like that. Like live to fight another day, man. If you are curled up in the corner, like you really just shouldn't be complaining about a stoppage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I actually had a pretty good back and forth again on Twitter with Kaposa, Grabaka Hitman, one of the best accounts on Twitter. And we were kind of talking about big shout. We're shouting out people left and right. Just with me being the host this time around, I'm ready to spread the love. Tony, we need more love on the show. Yeah. So we were talking, and we were just kind of talking about how with stoppages like that, I was okay with it. He was okay with it. I feel like we agree on a lot of things, but I'll get your take too. I feel like context should come into stoppages a little bit because, if you watch the sequences leading up to that fight, you watched, when he hit the ground, what happened. He was kind of out of it, kind of rolling over, kind of turned his back. There was no way that anything good was going to come out of that. You can't take the time into account. You can't take, there's only 2 seconds left so I can let this guy get hit 12 extra times. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about context. I'm talking about what happened leading up to the finish. And he was getting tagged. He got dropped a bunch of times. I wish we'd see more stoppages that use context versus consistency. If a guy is getting dropped 4 times in a row and you're on the verge of stopping it each time, I won't get mad at you on the 4th time if you only let him eat 9 shots instead of 10 before stopping it. So that's just kind of my opinion. I think that you can take context into it I'm not a referee. I didn't take referee school, obviously, or whatever. But, for me, I would be happy with those type of stoppages going forward. I can't argue with them.
Yeah, like I totally agree with you. Context, it's all about context. If a guy's been dropped multiple times or, or like I think there was a fight later on this card even where context came into play again, where you're just constantly not defending yourself, and you're let's say you're letting the cage prop you up. That's a big one I see where fighters are basically out on their feet, but they're propped up by the cage. But if they weren't by the cage, they'd probably be on the mat, right? Like that's where you have to take context into account. And also like I don't think the timing of the round matters at all. I wouldn't take that into account. But just pure damage and I don't know where else I was going with that, but yeah.
You're on point, man. That's completely what I'm seeing too. And I wish there was one really good example of it that was on a recent either PFL or UFC. I can't remember, but I wish I could go back and refer to it. But I'm starting to see it more, which is a good thing. I think there's a big difference between, the body language of the guy like Max Mustaki showed in that fight. Like, every time that he needed to move, he did. And he fought back. I think that's a big part of it too. Like, if you're getting chewed up on the feet, and even if you're surviving, so you get out of a scramble that you're getting pummeled, you circle back and you guys, you start getting back into more of a technical striking match. there's a big difference between that and like what Mustaki did, where Turner was tagging him, and he knew he was going to get the fight was going to get stopped if he didn't do something. So he would return the favor. So I think those are the type of sequences that you have to look at as a referee and determine whether or not there's a point in letting a fight continue. If anything's going to get better, or chances are things are going to get better. I'm not trying to say that every stoppage should be on the, if a guy gets dropped twice, they should stop every fight. But I just think that the context is really, really key.
I remember what I was going to say now. Yeah, I know there's a rule or some kind of guideline in boxing where you're only allowed to get knocked down. This might differ from state to state, but let's say there's a certain amount of knockdowns, the fight is automatically called.
I think kickboxing too, isn't it? Isn't it glory or something? If you get knocked down 3 times in a round, they stop it.
Something like that. And I think they have something similar with certain states and boxing commissions and whatnot. Yeah. Like a certain number of knockdowns, and it's just like the fight's over. Because that's how, I mean, we're going to get real dark here, but that's how people die, man. Like if you're getting knocked down over and over again and just repeatedly suffering, that kind of damage to the brain, that's when you're really in trouble.
For sure. It's actually interesting because I had a pretty bad experience with brain injuries in high school. I almost had to take a whole year off of school. I almost didn't graduate on time. A lot of stuff, missed sports, you name it. Took me probably 2 years to get normal again. And my doctor at the time, I was lucky because – what was that?
I said you're normal right now? I thought you were a little bit slow.
Normal or weirder. I'm not sure which one. They might have fucked up. They might have lied to me. But one of the leading concussion specialists in the whole United States and in the world is actually not too far away from me, Robert Cantu. And it's funny because I actually asked him about it. I was like, the funny thing is I'm really into MMA and stuff. And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, honestly, that sport, we did a pretty good study at Boston University Brain Lab is a big one. They send all these, Aaron Hernandez's brain went there to get analyzed, all these different brains from all different sports for CTE and all that stuff. That's where they do the studies. He's one of the guys that runs it. But he was like, yeah,
Aaron Hernandez, the New England Patriots player who killed a bunch of people?
Correct. I believe his brain went there. Bob Probert was a Detroit Red Wings enforcer who died when he was 50. But he was one of the all-time fight leaders. There's a lot of different people that have gone there.
New England.
Yeah. But he was saying that he thought that MMA was safer solely on that fact, that it was a big difference between the fact if you get in an MMA fight, if you get hurt, usually, not always, you recognize not always, but usually things end for you pretty quickly after that. You're eating a couple shots, that's it. Where boxing, that doesn't happen. You continue to get up until you get knocked down again, and then you get back up again. So
same with football. You thought MMA was safer than football as well?
I don't know about that. I never asked him about that. He worked with the NFL a lot on their concussion protocols and stuff like that. He was kind of a liaison between the players and a bunch of different stuff. You can look him up online, but yeah, I should have asked him about that. But it seemed like his big thing was repeated hits to the head in a if you're getting hit and KO'd or TKO'd 14 times in the span of a 12-round boxing fight. It's a lot better than an MMA where, you get rocked and you get choked out or you tap to an armbar or something. So I'm sure there's instances in both that are equally as bad, but overall he was saying that mixed martial arts has the potential for it to be a safer sport than boxing. I've seen some people scoff at that idea.
Yeah.
But, taking it from a guy that seems like he knows what he's talking about, that was kind of the public opinion.
That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I think we've talked about that fight enough. And moving on to the next one, Toby Misich from Hawaii, just another guy that was looking to add on to this wave, no pun intended, of Hawaiian fighters that are coming into the UFC. Just a gritty guy, 10-5, entering the fight, taking on a guy from your neck of the woods. I think, have you seen him compete live? Ricky Palacios, did you ever see him compete live for Combate?
Yeah. I saw him a couple times. He was I think we talked about this on a past show, might have the most Combate fights of anybody ever.
Yeah, I believe we did touch on this last week because you were saying he was an OG and he had competed on their first ever first ever event. So yes, he is an OG and he put on a good performance, man. I tweeted about, I don't remember if I tweeted it after the Espinoza fight or if I tweeted it right after this fight, that these performances where a guy goes the decision and he puts on a solid performance against another guy who's competing to get in the UFC, like those speak to me a lot more than I feel like you can get a lot more out of them than a 30-second knockout. Sure, those 30-second knockouts are super impressive and everything, but for me, like being able to see a guy's full range of skills, see how he deals with different problems that he may deal with in a fight where Misic just starts to land and how he adjusts and things like that. I was thoroughly impressed with Ricky Palacios. This was the first time outside of tape that I've seen either one of them fight, out of clips here and there that I skimmed and scanned. But I thought he looked really good, man. I thought his speed was really good. He kind of looks like somebody that shouldn't, you'd look at him and say, oh, that guy's, he doesn't look like much. But, man, he was explosive. He would go from 0 to 100, not a lot of wasted movement. And he picked up the 30-27 decision. What was your overall assessment of his performance? Did you think that was the same Ricky Palacios that the Combate had seen? Where would you compare this performance?
Yeah, no, that's him. That's definitely him for sure. Like the same fight he put on versus Chris Avila, and other fights I've seen. I think Benji Gomez is one of the other ones I saw, but he actually got the finish in that one. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy who fights anywhere from 135 to 155. He doesn't care. He'll fight, whatever weight class, really. So that's a cool thing about him. We're still waiting for a Combate Americas fighter to get signed. I think last season we had Castaneda, right?
Yes, sir.
And he didn't get the contract. I kind of, I knew going in, Ricky, he's just not really a finisher. And so I knew it was going to be really tough for him to get the contract, man. He was going to have to go balls out for a finish, and he's just not that kind of guy. He's much more, he's a brawler, but he's a technical brawler, I guess you could say. So I thought it was going to be tough for him. But this win right here, like we talked about before, I mean, this could lead to much bigger things. He was fighting on Combate before. Maybe he gets the shot at LFA. This is a guy that definitely is on the trajectory is moving upwards. And like I said, he can compete at multiple weight classes. So that's a big plus for him.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually have a question for you. Outside of what we just talked about, I'm trying to pull up the exact quote here, but something interesting that I thought that Ricky Palacios told me in our chat for my interview over, can see it, read it over on MMA Today, was that he said that that he closed out pretty much, I guess he had a food truck company or he owned a food truck or something, a family business, that's how he made a lot of money. And he said about a year and a half ago, he had to take everything out of his life that was distraction outside of his family. So he really focused on fighting. But something he said at the end of a quote with me, he said, that this fight, the fight against Misic has just happened. He said, I'm going to say this is a do or die fight for my career with where I'm at. So he didn't get we can, little spoiler alert, didn't get the contract this week. With that being said, where do you think he goes from here? Do you think he should sit around? I mean, we've seen Chris Curtis, he didn't get the contract and he was just like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. Do you think, he's a guy that is still going to be on the UFC's radar even though he didn't get the contract? Should he wait and sit around and see what comes, or should he call it quits?
100% think he should stick around for a little bit. Last season, we saw how many of those guys from Contender Series got picked up.
Yeah, it was a lot. Even like some of the guys like Matt Bissett and Steven Peterson who lost on the show and didn't even fight again. It wasn't even like they lost and then won one and then got back in the UFC. Like they were signed off losses in the Contender Series.
And I think I brought this up before. In 2019, there's going. If you think there's a lot of UFC events right now, which there are, there's going to be even more in 2019. And so just think about it. There's a lot of undercards. There's a lot of late, pullouts and whatnot. I just said this guy can fight anywhere from 135 to 155. If they need a late notice, stick around, buddy. They're going to need you at some point. I can guarantee you. They're going to need you at some point. If it's a California card, if it's somewhere on the West Coast, I'm pretty sure you would be getting a call.
Yeah, especially where he's so versatile too. You know, he's fought at 155, 145, and I know he's had some trouble making weight at 135. But maybe a UFC fight would give him that little extra incentive to
Yeah,
make
I'm
that.
working with a better nutritionist. Being around Kabati, I know that you have to understand when you're at promotions that are kind of at the lower level, you're not getting like when you watch UFC Embedded and you see these fighters working with like these professional nutritionists who are like controlling their diets and like they have like basically like a whole team like monitoring their weight cut. These guys don't have any of that shit. Like they don't have anything close to that. They're doing their weight cut all on their own. Basically, they'll have like a couple like someone from their team, that they train with, their spar with, like trying to help them with their weight cut, and that's about it. So way different situation. You get a chance at a UFC fight. I feel like I'm just preaching now, but yeah,
No, you're good.
it's different.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's actually what he pointed out to me. You know, he took the complete blame. He was like, honestly, I have nobody to blame but myself. I should have been more focused. But it's kind of tough with me with when I had all this other stuff going on to be able to manage my nutrition on top of it, make it convenient, things like that. So UFC opportunity, I think, would provide that security for him that he could then focus on it. So that would be good. I think he's on the list of especially with last season, how many guys like grabbed off of it that coming off losses, wins, whatever. I think he'll be a guy that we see in the UFC debut maybe late this year, early next year, and I'm sure he won't be the only one. I'm sure there's a bunch of guys from Contender Series that will have their names put on these lists, whether they're physical or they're a figment of Mick Maynard's imagination or Sean Shelby. I think we'll be seeing a lot of these guys from this season that don't have UFC contracts right now. But let's move on to the co-main event. It was a very highly anticipated matchup in the middleweight division. 2 5-0 fighters competing, both from LFA. It was one of the more even fights on the Contender Series, odds-wise, of this season. Bevon Lewis, guy we saw again. We saw him last year. He's put on a UFC developmental deal. Basically, the UFC pays for his training, provides Performance Institute, stuff for him and a bunch of other. I think they also might help pay for his camp, things like that. I'm not really sure. I'll have to look more into what the deal is.
He's able to use the UFC Performance Institute, right?
What's that?
He's able to use the Performance Institute?
Yeah, so the Institute, I think, like all the things that come with it, all the programs they have, nutrition, whatever. And then also I think somebody said that they end up getting some funding for their camp to train too. And they also get, the UFC kind of guides them into an opportunity that is good. In this case, it was LFA, a promotion that Bevon had already fought for. So he won on a Contender Series last year against Elias Urbina, a tough veteran. Had a fight for LFA a couple months ago against, I believe, a 3-1 fighter, a 3-2 fighter. Didn't look particularly overwhelmingly impressive in that fight, so it made me a little nervous. I actually picked Alton Cunningham to win this fight. Alton was, not like I said, another very, it wasn't like the only reason Alton Cunningham was there was to lose to Bevon Lewis. Sometimes I feel like, we'll see it in a couple weeks. I think Tabaris Gordon is a very good prospect, but he's very green. He's 3-0, and he's fighting Greg Hardy. I think the main reason Tabaris Gordon is on the Contender Series this year is because he's fighting Greg Hardy. I don't feel that way about Alton Cunningham. I think Bevon Lewis is one of the most promoted fighters in this on the season, and I felt like Alton Cunningham had a really good chance at beating him. And Bevon Lewis completely proved me wrong, knocking out Alton Cunningham with some standing knees, two consecutive ones, and then one that missed. Really impressive stuff. I think, with the middleweight division in the state that we're in, we could use like a flashy up-and-coming prospect to get us all excited. I mean, we saw what Israel Adesanya has done to this division. People are stoked to see him fight. So adding Bevon Lewis's name to that division should spruce things up a little bit. What were your overall thoughts? Did you think we saw some improvement from last season? And, where do you think he goes from here? You feel like he's going to be a player at some point in the 185-pound division?
Yeah, definitely. I thought I was very surprised. I thought maybe there was something wrong with Alton Cunningham, or I guess there was. That's my dog.
They don't like Bevon Lewis. Come on.
My dog apparently does not like Bevon Lewis. No, but I think Alton Cunningham just had no idea what to do in the clinch. Like Bevon Lewis came out and immediately went to that. He must have, known that was a potential weakness. Elbows from there, nasty knees. Alton Cunningham was getting dropped left and right. And another, I thought it was a good stoppage. I think people were questioning the stoppage again, like another question. And I was like, there's no problem with that at all. Like, you have to take context into things. And if you're getting dropped constantly and you just look like you have, like, Alton Cunningham looked like a fish out of water in the clinch. Like, it is what it is, it looked bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. I watched his past performances, and I think that, that wasn't, and whether or not it was, it very well could have been on Bevon's, it could have been Bevon's, like, him putting his skills upon Cunningham that caused Cunningham to look nothing like we've ever seen him before, in a bad way. But regardless, I think Cunningham kind of, maybe it's a learning experience for him, whatever, but he didn't muster up much offense in this fight. It was very one-sided. I'm not really sure I could say much more than you did. Bevon Lewis just impressing people, living up to the hype, and kind of, erasing that LFA to kind of, it was a dominant decision, but it just wasn't that impressive. Like,
I think someone pointed out to you, and I kind of, without even seeing the fight, it just kind of made sense to me. Was that maybe, he cruised in that fight not wanting to take an injury.
Yeah. Because just for people that might not know this, he knew about the Contender Series opportunity. There was a couple fighters this season that knew about the Contender Series opportunity before they had fights for LFA. Macy Barber, who's headlining this week, she knew about her opportunity, and as did Bevon Lewis. He knew if he won that fight, he would get an opportunity on Contender Series. So, yeah, very, very, very possible that he was fighting smart.
Am I the only one that thought the Macy Barber promo was like the best one they've done so far?
You know what, man? What was I doing? Was I making food or something? I had to go because I didn't want to miss Dana's decision. Maybe I was using the bathroom. I don't remember. I just remember seeing the part with Barber saying something about she wanted to be the youngest UFC champion, but I honestly will have to watch it, pay closer attention this week when they air it on the Contender Series, because
because I guess they did do that between the main event and the decision was when they aired the Macy Barber versus who's her opponent again?
Jamie Colleen.
Yeah, Jamie Colleen. And man, both of them were like, just very quotable, and just the way, it was promoted and everything. It got me super hyped. Like, I thought that was the best promotion package they put up so far.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really great fight, too. There hasn't been a lot of there's only 2 women's fights, I think, on this season, which is the same. Maybe they had 3 last year. I think they only had 2. But part of the reason for that is that it is warranted. I mean, like, I see some people are kind of accusing the UFC of, like, sexism, like, oh, why aren't they promoting the UFC's women's divisions? But I also think you got to realize that the women's mixed martial arts, we think MMA in general is a young sport. Women's mixed martial arts is super young, like super young. There was no opportunities for women really before, like, the Carranos rolled around, started maybe to start getting some women, and then obviously, like, we're going to start seeing the Rousey, that era generation that inspire even more people. But these 2 girls are legitimate. They both earned it. I think sometimes the girls that the UFC bring in, kind of green. Some of them, only have a handful of fights, but I think this one's pretty legitimate, and I'm looking forward to it as well. We'll get to that. We'll hold that thought, and we'll get to that when we talk about our preview briefly at the end. But before we do that, I just want to talk about the main event real quick. And to me, man, this was one of the fights on Contender Series I was just thrilled about. I was super looking forward to it, and I feel like it was a good fight. I'm always down for competitive back-and-forth chess matches, but maybe it didn't live up to the brutal, devastating finishes that we expect, or the decisive. I don't know what you want to say, like showcase of skills. It was a close fight. Neither guy really screamed, I guess, at Dana White or Sean Shelby, like, sign me. Kevin Aguilar versus Joey Gomez. Kevin Aguilar, the king of violence, the angel of death, coming in there, moving up a weight class on short notice to take on a relatively unknown, undefeated fighter out of Hawaii, Joey Gomez. Joey Gomez compared his style to Khabib in our interview. Pretty similar. I mean, obviously he's not on Khabib's level as in terms of skills, but he has the same skill set. I was impressed by his performance. A lot of people thought Aguilar was just going to go out there and murk him. And I actually, when all was said and done, I thought Gomez had won that fight. What did you think overall of the performance by Kevin Aguilar? Who did you think won that fight? Because I saw a lot of people were picking him. When all was said and done, people were saying they thought Aguilar had a 29-28. Other people were saying, like myself, were saying Gomez had a 29-28. What was your overall thoughts on the two fighters' performances, and who did you think won that decision?
It was a very close decision, but I mean, without rewatching it, I would say at the time I thought Joey Gomez had that. I can't say I was very, and this is all, there's a lot of factors around this with Kevin Aguilar, obviously taking the fight on short notice and moving up. But if we're just looking at this fight, without taking that into account, it wasn't impressive. It just wasn't. Joey Gomez, I thought, was much more impressive than Kevin Aguilar. Then again, like I said, Joey Gomez, full camp, everything. Kevin Aguilar coming on short notice, not his weight class. So there's a lot of caveats here. But overall, my biggest impression from this fight was watch out for Joey Gomez. Down the line, Kevin Aguilar, I'm sure will fight an LFA card soon. I'll check that out and keep my eye on him. But as of right now, my biggest takeaway from this fight was Joey Gomez was very impressive, and I thought he won that fight.
Yeah, you're not alone there. There's certain guys, I do some work for Tapology, and I'm not just trying to plug them, shamelessly here, but I think they do an excellent job of and it's not perfect. Fighters complain all the time about it, but their rankings do give you an idea of some of these guys that, have these good records, and they have beaten everyone in their region, but they don't fight for an LFA. They don't fight for a CES. They don't fight for a Titan. They fight for some small regional promotions. They might even switch promotions. But Joey Gomez is a guy that I remember last season, I was given a name that Luis Raul Gomez would be competing, but I was only given a last name. So I'm looking up. I'm like, which Gomez is it? There's a million of them. I came across an undefeated fighter out of Hawaii named Joey Gomez, and I had him on the short list of guys I thought it could be. He's a guy that I've heard about quite a bit. People have talked about him, whatever. I'd never seen him fight. There was really no footage of him online. There was one fight from like 3 years ago, stuff like that. But for him to go out there and put on a performance like that, like you said, I thought his stock went way up. I think a lot of people were just thinking, this guy's not from LFA, not from a major regional promotion, probably not going to be that good, probably has a padded record. I thought he looked great, man, to your point. I was really impressed with him.
Yeah, and I mean, even to add on to that, he was a 3-1 underdog. I saw people saying, and this still might be true. Obviously, this could be true. This happens all the time. Guys kind of fall through the cracks. But people were saying, Kevin Aguilar, shouldn't even have to fight. Like, he should be in the UFC anyway. He's going to run through this guy. Like, what's the point of even having this fight? And it's like, that's what the Contender Series is for. Like, it's to, like, find weaknesses. Like, if you have a weakness, it's going to get found out. You're going to be fighting somebody, that's probably tougher than you ever fought before. And it's also about finding hidden gems like Joey Gomez. Like, how the hell would we ever find out about Joey Gomez without the show? Like, like you said, there's literally no footage of him whatsoever. He's fighting for promotions that nobody has ever heard of, not even us, and we cover, all kinds of crazy shit. So if we don't know about the promotions you're fighting in, it's some real backwater stuff. Like, and so now there's this guy out there that nobody would have known, and he's on people's radars, which is, I think, is the coolest thing about Contender Series. Yeah,
110%. I couldn't have said it better. And I think on both ends of that, like I think that Kevin Aguilar going out there and having a performance like that, I think honestly it could help him in the long run. Like, he's gone out there, and I think obviously if you watch his performances, he has crazy finishes, but he doesn't necessarily there's times in his fights where he does struggle, like the other guy has an upper hand. Like, there's always stuff that he can improve on, but I think a fight like this where he looks at it, like, now he can definitely go back, make himself better. That's something that I always, when guys go to the UFC and they haven't been tested and they haven't had a close decision, they haven't had to overcome adversity, like sometimes guys are in for rude awakenings. Like Sage Northcutt has kind of become the not necessarily like the butt end of a joke, but like people are always like talk about how the UFC tried to push somebody that wasn't ready, and I think there's so much truth to that. Like it's not his fault. He went out there, had a dominant regional performance, but he's never truly tested. So when he gets in the UFC and he has to face adversity, you know, he doesn't even know how to do it. Like it's not something he's ever experienced before, and that's the fights. Those are the fights that matter. So I'm thinking that this might be a good thing for Kevin Aguilar. But overall, I would say, what would you grade this? I know we've been doing that. I think we did that last week or the week before. Letter grade. What would you grade this, Tone?
What's the lowest grade I've given so far? I would have to shit.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to the record books on that one. But for the sake of this, off your memory, we won't hold you to it until I hold you to it.
B minus.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. I think it's a B minus as well. A little higher standard, like we said, Contender Series compared to some other events, just because of how exciting it is. But that's a good pick. And then we talk about the picks too. You know, Dana White giving out 2 contracts. He said one of them, the UFC matchmakers didn't necessarily want him to sign, but he was going to do it anyway. That one was Jordan Espinoza, latest addition of the UFC flyweight roster, and then obviously Bevon Lewis, newest middleweight in the UFC. Did you agree with this decision? And if not, what would you have changed?
Are you asking me if Dana White made the White decision?
I'm asking you if you made the White decision. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, 100%. The only thing I probably, you know, yeah, he 100% made the right decision, because the first fight, there's just too many question marks there. Jalen Turner, you know, showed a lot. And I like how Dana's still giving feedback. You know, he said he'll keep an eye on him. So we're still getting those kind of updates, you know. But, yeah, that was the right decision. I don't think Kevin Aguilar did it. Like, I don't even think Kevin Aguilar won the fight, so it'd be very weird for him to get a contract off of that. You know, if he deserves – I know I feel like I'll get backlash for this, because people, you know, Kevin Aguilar has definitely served his dues in what used to be what was it before LFA? Legacy, not the other one, Legacy. And then he went to LFA. So he's served his dues. He maybe should have a UFC contract by now. But if we're basing this off of this show alone, I don't think that performance warranted a contract. I just don't.
Completely agree with you, man. You know, it's one of those things, like, I'm glad that – I think the Contender Series has creeped into it a little bit, but I'm glad that most of the decisions on who gets signed have been what kind of performance you put on there. Because I've seen some people say, oh, you know, Chris Curtis was 33. What kind of prospect is that? Well, then don't have him on the show. If there's no chance of him winning a contract, don't have him on the show. So I'm glad that they judge it off of, you know, they at least so far they've made most of the decisions based off of the performance that they see in the cage, not what people's baggage are bringing in or what credentials they have from prior. I think that's a good thing about this show.
Unless you're Greg Hardy.
Although his performance was very good too.
I guess, can we talk about that at the end?
Yeah, let's talk about it right now, and then we'll talk about next week. Right. So Greg Hardy's back August 7th. He got the last spot on Contender Series. He'll be taking on Tobias Boone Gordon, another. I guess he was a high school football player. You looked into him a little bit more than I did, Tone. I've seen him fight over when I was covering events for Flow Combat, and I think he fought for LFA once as well. But any insight on that fight? You know, what are your thoughts on Greg Hardy's second shot and you know, his opponent?
So I think you mentioned it earlier in the show. This looks like, you know, them trying to get Greg Hardy a win, and it's kind of blatant. You know, if you saw his LFA fight, which I think is readily available on YouTube, I'm not sure about the Flow Combat stuff, but at least the LFA fight, is kind of a heavier guy. You know, not very technical. Doesn't offer much besides just throwing bombs out there and kind of relying on athleticism. You know, I was able to find out that he was a scouted high school football lineman, I believe. So it's definitely somebody who's got some athleticism in him, and has that kind of football background. I'm not sure if that's like why the UFC chose him or Dana White or whoever picks these fights. It's because of the football background. You got, but I would have liked to see them run back what was going to be the original Greg Hardy fight? It was going to be versus
Sales from I think Georgia, North Carolina, somewhere around that same area as Gordon actually. But he was a bigger body, a guy that was, I think he was like 7-1 or 6-1 or something.
I'd much rather that be this next fight. I
agree.
I don't understand this one. It seems very set up, just for Greg Hardy to get another finish.
Yeah. It doesn't help Gordon much either because, I guess obviously if he goes in there and knocks out Greg Hardy, like that's pretty sweet. But he's a guy I think who's on a trajectory to be somebody like next season that would be on the Contender Series. So, I just think he's kind of green. So I feel like while there's always the chance that he could get this knockout that we're talking about, like chances are he's going to be at 3-1 come the end of the summer.
3-1 isn't that bad though.
No, not at all, especially for heavyweights.
It's heavyweight. People know you get knocked out. They know you took a fight against Greg Hardy, who's just an otherworldly athlete. I think there's a lot more to gain here, just publicity-wise. Like, I think it's fine. I don't agree with the matchup itself. Like, if we're not going to test Greg Hardy, like, why is he even on the Contender Series?
Yeah. And I honestly feel like you said, the Sales fight would have been great. I feel like he's gone backwards. Hardy, like Sales was the best opponent. What's that?
He has gone back. It's gone 3-2-1 like backwards.
Austin Lane was 4-0. Tavares Gordon's 3-0. And Lane and Gordon I've kind of put in the same boat where they were guys that showed a lot of promise, but they were green. Like guys that if they were outside of a heavyweight division and they were, that good in their division, they would probably be getting a developmental deal or a developmental look. Like they're not guys that you could sign off of their skills now.
I feel like Austin Lane was like an actual tough matchup. Like you're talking about another, a fellow and a former NFL type athlete, who has, and you saw that, very brief. You saw that in his fights leading up to the Greg Hardy fight, where just the quickness, the explosiveness, and everything was there. So I thought that was still a tough test for Hardy, and I was totally on board with that fight.
For sure. Let me just clarify too, because I think that the Lane matchup I think was a tough matchup for Hardy. That was his pro debut. So there's levels to this game. Like I 100% think what Hardy did was impressive. I think it was a tough opponent. At the same time, I just think that Lane and Gordon compared to an opponent like Sales are a lot less polished, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so this apparently is not going to be considered a UFC fight out of his 4, fight deal that he got or whatever.
Yeah, I honestly I don't know what's going on with that. I like the 4-fight deal thing. I know James Lynch has been all over this in terms of what Hardy's exactly signed to. My impression of what a UFC developmental deal was that there weren't any fights involved, that it was we're basically going to pay for you. We're going to almost like manage your career. So we're going to give you training money. We're going to give you an opportunity to fly out here, meet with our specialists, get, I don't know, they do all types of tests, and the trainers look at these guys and tell them what they could be doing better or worse or whatever. That was my impression of what this was. And then all of a sudden this 4-fight deal thing floated around. I don't know where it originated from.
They might have had to bend their own rules a little bit because we're talking about, such a big name here.
Do you remember where that 4-fight thing came out of to start or no?
It came from, I don't know. It was a very –
you're not the first person to say that to me. I'm just curious. I've been trying to figure out exactly what source it came from.
It came from one of the major sites. We're not talking about, I don't know. It was one of the big 4, like MMA Junkie, MMA Fighting, Bloody Elbow, one of those. Yeah. So whatever it was, I think it's reliable info. Sure. At least that's all we have to go on right now. And maybe the UFC had to bend their own rules to get this guy because it's a big name, like I said, and if you're not offering him any assurances that he's going to get UFC fights in the future, and it's still not insurance. I mean, they can still cut him, but to have that 4-fight deal, it is, locking him up, basically keeping him away from competitors like Bellator, who would snatch him up probably in a heartbeat. So I think it's smart. As far as the source goes, now that I think about it more, I think it was actually a quote from Dana given to somebody.
Was it to Aaron? Because I saw that Aaron Bronstetter put up a video of his interview.
Probably Aaron. I would guess it's Aaron.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, that we'll have to look more into that and try to figure it out. But I'm not surprised. I think off of merit, like the guy's a beast. There's no denying that. This will be just another step for him. Worst case scenario, say he goes out there and still wins, but it's not that as impressive as his last finish. Like, he's getting better. He's getting more experience. He's fighting guys that in the heavyweight landscape in the United States and in North America, like, a 3-0 guy is somebody that's already a touted prospect. So it'll be interesting, man. But before we get to the August 7th, I don't know if you have any more things to say about Greg Hardy. No. Before we get to the August 7th card, we have week 8, we have week 7, week 6, and next week we have week 5. 5 more exciting matchups, in my opinion. I think that this past week, I thought the talent level wasn't necessarily the highest of the season. Not to say that it wasn't good, but it delivered. And then this week, I think there's a fair amount of like relative unknowns, guys that don't fight for an LFA, don't fight for.
Did you just call Paige Van Zandt's boyfriend but relatively unknown?
Hey, yeah, I'm just talking about their talents. I mean, people like to shit on Austin Vanderfort, but I honestly, I'm kind of like, I think he's going to be a good fighter. He's maybe a little green still, but
they're giving him a tough test. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, absolutely, Angelo Trevino. But we'll get to that in 1 second. Now, the fight that kicks everything off is Edmund Shabazian versus Antonio Jones. I wasn't too particular with Shabazian. The name did ring a bell, and when I Googled him, it was because of a story that ran earlier either this year or late last year. It must have been last year, like mid last year. Ronda Rousey was getting into management at the time before she was with WWE, and Edmund Shabazian was the first fighter to sign with her and have her be his manager. So I'm assuming that's part of this. He's only 20 years old. He fights out of CXF, which I believe is out of California, kind of known for some questionable matchmaking, as I recall. How all those people out in California are always acting so shady. But yeah, he's undefeated, 6-0, 20 years old. He's taking on Antonio Jones, he's actually in the Air Force. I talked to him earlier. I didn't know a whole lot about him before this fight. He's fought for Fury FC, holds a win over UFC veteran Roger Narvaez. I don't know are you familiar with either one of these guys? Other important note, Shabazian trains with none other than Edmund Taverdian. I know that will probably be a big storyline for this fight, but do you know anything much about these guys, Tony, or not really?
I mean, I hate to shit on my own, regional scene, but CFX and his 6-0 record,
Yep.
It's probably a little empty. I guarantee if you go to his Tapology page, there's probably some questionable fights in there.
Yeah. Looking at his 6 opponents, they have a combined record of 21 and 44, I think. I just did quick math, but one of the opponents had 38 losses. So
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's California regional scene.
For sure, man. They need to get you guys a promotion out there, a big one.
I'm telling you, I don't know what's up.
Someday.
That's why I'm getting
out of here,
Nolan. That's why I'm going to Vegas.
Yeah, true. And I always say about fighters that you look at their record and you're like, they didn't fight anybody good. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a bad fighter. It just means that there's something you have to be aware of. Because we've seen other guys that have had kind of squash matches leading to the UFC and then they do well. So that's the first matchup, and then the second one that we just referenced, Austin Vanderfort, aka Paige Van Zandt's fiance. He
Oh, they
is,
engaged? Oh shit.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Come on, man, you got to get up on the or the
We're not
relationship status of MMA fighters.
sorry, we're not MMA mania.
But
Ooh, shots fired.
yeah, no. So I think this is a good matchup. Vanderford is he's fighting Angelo Trevino, team alpha male guy. Vanderford's a very strong wrestler. He's very strong physically, and he's also good at wrestling. So I think this is a good matchup. I think Austin Vanderford, to me, I think is hated on for unnecessary reasons. Everything I've seen with him, he seems like a good dude. I know some stuff that I've been told recently, some stuff that he's done to kind of, I don't know if you want to call it charity work, but I was talking to somebody that, and I'll be coming out with a story, I think, about it for MMA Today, but about somebody's life that he helped turn around. So he's a good dude, in my opinion. I think he gets a lot of hate. I know that putting out the on Paige Van Zandt's man thing probably isn't going to get all the most positive comments for you, but I think he's somebody that off of merit, like he's a guy that if he wasn't Paige Van Zandt's boyfriend, I think, or fiance, I think that he could end up on the show anyway. And he's got a tough test with Angelo Trevino. Do you know anything about Trevino, man, other than he's from Alpha Male? I know he's from out your way.
Yeah, so he's actually fought in one of the few good promotions we have out here, Global Knockout. Took on what camp? Tyler Milner is from Jackson Wink, who's was at the time was considered a pretty solid prospect. I haven't followed him since, but he handily beat him and has put on some good shows. Really tough guy. Typical team alpha male, kind of bro-ish dude. But he's got some. He's not very big for the weight class. I don't know what Vandenford's size is, but Trevino is I think he's like 5'9", so I don't know if that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, I did not notice that yet, but I'm glad you pointed it out. I'll be watching more tape this weekend on the card. But yeah, that's another good fight, and it leads us into our next one, which our guy Sean Bitter just broke recently, as in a couple hours before we recorded this, that Hawaiian Maki Pitolo, I believe he's Hawaiian. Maybe I'm wrong. Hawaiian Maki Pitolo, aka Coconut Bombs, is out of his fight with Chibwickham Onyengecha, one of the more tough names that I've ever had to pronounce in the sport, which is saying something. But yeah, I mean, we don't really know what's going on with that fight, so we can't really analyze it. I guess we'll see who replaces him. I don't know what else I can say much more than that. But
to be decided.
Co-main event, one of my picks. I think this guy is so talented, and nobody's talking about him. Vince Morales. He's Ricky Simone's cousin. He was my number one fighter to sign for Boise, for UFC Boise. Article that ran on Flow Combat. Explosive bantamweight. Super, super talented, technical, power, full package, has good wins on his record. He's facing Domingo Pilarte from LFA. I don't know if you know, neither one of these guys are from West Coast area. I think Pilarte's from Texas. I'll double check on that. He is from Houston. Trains under Daniel Pineda, former UFC veteran. Do you have anything to add on to that one? Have you ever seen either one of these guys go at it?
No, but I'm excited for it.
It's gonna be good, man. I'm telling you. Watch Morales, and Pilarte's a high action fighter too. So I think it's a great fight. And then our main event, which we referenced a little earlier, Macy Barber versus Jamie Colleen. I think this is an excellent women's fight. One of the better women's regional fights that could be put on any promotion. Jamie Colleen returning, second time on Contender Series from her win last year. Took a year off due to an ACL surgery. She blew her ACL in that fight that she won over Tiffany Masters last year, taking on red-hot prospect Macy Barber, who was only, I believe, 20 years old. So two solid prospects that the UFC have on their hands here, and the two ladies clashing in the main event.
Yeah, Macy Barber is super legit. Like, I've seen most – I think I've probably seen all four of her fights in LFA. And she's a complete package, just 20 years old, that new breed of, I think she said she started training when she was like 4 years old. Very much like Aaron Pico, like, where she is well versed in boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, like just has it all. Very tough fight for Jamie. I know she has the experience on her side. Is also quite a bit older. I think there's 12-year age gap here. So this will be very interesting. Size might also come into play. Macy Barber's a pretty tall girl even for strawweight, so we'll see.
Yeah, man, it's going to be another good week, and then we'll have 3 more out. We're only at the halfway mark, so a lot more excitement to come, and I think that's pretty much all we have for everyone tonight. First time hosting, went a little longer than usual. I'm a long-winded person, but we're getting there. Anything else you wanna plug? Anything going on? Just same old over at MMA Today.
Yeah, I mean, definitely check us out at MMA Today or at MMA-today.com if you type it in on your web browser like it's 1998. Or you can check us out on Twitter at MMA Today News. And great job hosting today, even though you made the episode go super long.
Yeah, the 3-hour edition. We'll get it. Next time when I'm hosting again, when the people demand that I'm back in the hosting chair, we'll shorten it down a little bit.
Hey, yeah, we'll let the fans decide. Vote who should host next week's episode.
Yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much all we got. That's Big Tone, aka Tony Fagnanos, at Big Tone MMA with an S at the end. I'm Nolan King at MMA_Kings. I'll be having some stuff come out for MMA Today, a bunch of interviews for the Contender Series for the rest of the season. Also, Flow Combat, I have a bunch of prospect pieces coming out. Doing some stuff for Tapology now too, so make sure to check out the biggest and best MMA database in the world. And that's all we got for you guys tonight. Thanks.
All right. Oh, I'm supposed to